So as today you guys can see the screen, I have Chris and Trent with me. So our first speaker, Chris, he have a over 23 years experience in telecommunication and technology industry. And his role, he lead the regional product strategy in P&L roadmap for Lumen network. So, and also we have Trent, he have 15 years of experience in network and technology, responsible for building and maintaining the solution roadmap. Hi, Chris. Hi, Trent.
Good morning.
Morning.
So yeah, thank you. So without further ado, I pass it over to Chris. Yes, Chris, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Thanks, Kenneth. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for taking time out to join us during today's session. We're going to talk about SASE and how it's evolved. Tran and myself will be taking turns here. The agenda will consist of 3 parts here. I'll take up the first part, talking about how the customer experience has driven the SASE adoption and what's brought us to this point over the many years. And then I'll hand off to Tran to take you through some use case and how a little bit more detail on how SASE works and how it's operated, what the impact is to your business. And then I'll follow up with the 6 steps to SASE adoption, which I'm sure everyone is eager to see and hear more about. Okay, so without further ado, I'll just move on to the first part. Okay, technology is reshaping, and I'm sure this isn't the first time you're going to hear this, but technology is reshaping how we live our life, how we do things, how business is operated, and how we engage with our customers. Okay, it's changing at such a fast pace that it's very challenging for product developers or product directors like myself to keep up with. And if you're in a position like mine or similar, you can have a front row seat to all of the fast changes that are taking place across all of the spectrum of products. You got network, security, IT, hosting, and agility. So all of these things changing very rapidly, faster and faster every year, makes it increasingly challenging for CIOs and CSOs to keep up with and managing their customer expectations. So when you're in this environment, it requires the team of people to be agile and be able to change on a very fast, very quickly, if you will, to adapt to the customer experience. And in addition to that, being able to engage in the market. So if I take you back, and as Kenneth alluded to my years of experience, when I first joined in the industry, about 25 years ago, was still IPLs or private lines on TDM technology. And then shortly thereafter came the internet, slow and tedious at the time, but yet a big thing for our world to adapt to. And then shortly thereafter, we had the layer 2 and layer 3 technologies, right? Ethernet, VPN. VPN had the class of service and SLAs that enterprise firmly grasped and held on to for many, many years. And we're willing to pay top dollar for that. And then all of a sudden we looked up and the cloud had arrived. I think over these many years with the cloud being around, we're still trying to absorb, okay, what is the cloud? What can it do? How does it help me in my business? And then over the last 10 years, we've seen a convergence of technologies occur across network security and IT agility, including the birth of SD-WAN. People gain more confidence in internet and the technology that provides, meaning we need less dependency on VPN networks and that technology. Okay, and then over the past few years, we've seen things like NFV, the network function virtualization, and virtualized services that have been adopted and sent out to market. That means virtual firewalls, virtual SD-WAN instances, lots of different things that are being virtualized, replacing those physical hardwares in the network. And then evolving to an API architecture where we've got APIs to every application imaginable out there. And that, improves the customer experience by being able to just log into a portal and access whatever that application may be, and gaining access to all the data and details. And that's the world we live in, this digital world that is around us right now, everywhere, all brought to you by technology and the changes that it involves. Take, for example, the coffee business. When we're getting our Starbucks, we're not waiting in lines anymore. We're accessing the app, ordering it, paying for it, seeing how many points we've got on through our application, and then showing up and picking up our coffee as we leave the restaurant. Same thing can be said about transportation. Uber, taxis, we're not waiting by the curb anymore for taxis. We're basically getting into that app, we're arranging for the taxi to arrive and then paying for it with no issues when you're getting out of the taxi. So all of these things happening, technology has brought to us. Surely we don't need any more technology change, do we? Not so fast. As customers wanted bigger, better, and faster, it doesn't end there. They now want bigger, better, faster, and more secure. And that changes with how we do things, how enterprise are set up today. The advent of the cloud, while beneficial and expediting applications to the cloud, has actually created challenges for CIOs, CSOs, network planners, product developers everywhere to determine how do we get from an on-prem network architecture, similar to what you see on the left, which is heavily filled with hardware and firewalls surrounding it, to a more virtual cloud-based architecture with access to those services anywhere and everywhere that you want, including maintaining, as the CIOs and CSOs try to maneuver between these worlds, if you will, they have to maintain the same security and compliance to be able to ensure customer business carries on, no impact to revenue streams, and so on and so forth. So this journey is one from network-centric to what we call borderless security, okay? And it's a challenge now that we, as CIOs and CSOs, need to take on. Why has the move to cloud applications caused problems? Well, as we just mentioned, the legacy enterprise networks assume users are working in offices, accessing applications hosted in data centers, and the security being applied in a data center. That's your on-prem network architecture that we just referenced, right? Now, applications moving so rapidly to the cloud create some challenges when you have to have those applications moving from the edge to the cloud to ensure the security is supported. This creates that unacceptable latency and congestion and performance issues that customers just would not accept, let alone our own business units accepting that, right? And what's compounded things right now is the advent of COVID over the last 2 years, where we already had a workforce that started working remotely. And now with COVID, everybody all of a sudden started working remotely everywhere globally. And this has just compounded the challenge, created more issues. And all of it means that it's harder for enterprises to secure their networks, in addition to maintaining that performance on the network as well. Okay. So that leads us to SASE, the Secure Access Service Edge. As the name implies, Gartner created or coined this term just a few years ago. It is not a product, it is an approach. And as the name does imply, it is a convergence of the network platform and security platforms, creating or enabling a secure edge solution for you and your customers, okay? What that solution does is takes your heavily weighted security features and functionality and supports processes, manages that in the cloud away from the network edge, so that the CP and hardware on the edge can focus on what it needs to do. More importantly, maintaining the lower latency, managing routing, and ensuring application performance on the network exceeds or meets what your requirements are. Okay, all of that impacts the customer business and what your internal users experience as they're running on the network and using applications. Okay, one product that actually complements SASE extremely well is SD-WAN. So for those that aren't aware, SD-WAN actually consists of your CPE or hardware at the customer prem and consists of a variety of technologies for your underlay network. It could be internet, VPN, a host of broadband features or third-party internet, that type of thing. But the CPE then can focus on managing that routing application and ensuring that it meets the policies that you've enabled from a routing and network performance perspective, while the security is managed from the cloud. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pass. We'll have more details on SASE coming up that Tran's going to walk through on the use case. But I want to pass it on to. We want to pause here to take a quick poll. And okay, thank you. And Kenneth, are you going to? Or...
Yes, it would be great if you guys can use your phone to scan it. And then to comment that, we're going to wait for 30 seconds. Work from home, security, core application.
Very good use cases there.
In experience. Remote assets. Okay, I think that's all they type. If you couldn't scan the QR code earlier, actually you can click in the link in the chat box.
Thanks,
3
Kenneth.
p.m. Yeah. Okay, Chris, what do you think of our audience answer?
Excellent examples. I think that they're already headed towards SASE implementation based off of the examples that have been listed here. And it's a good segue into our next session with Tran, is going to talk about more on SASE and what a good use case would look like as well. Tran,
Sure.
you want to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. Right. That was a very good result, and interestingly, is also aligned with many drivers that we see from our industry leaders. So they share with us that the primary motivator for adopting SASE actually it's some of them, like cloud security for remote workers and branch user. And when you have a hybrid of remote worker and branch user, how do you ensure consistent security policy enforcement and management across all the users, regardless of where they are? Right? They're also looking at drivers such as implement the zero trust network access, and at the same time, when people back to the office, majority of them, how do you accelerate the business growth through the SD-WAN agility? So as you can see, there is a mix of business and technology priority. And this is very critical because any technology adoption can just a pure technical discussion alone. It has to be aligned with the business strategy and the vision the company heading towards to, as you can see later. So let me just take you through one simple use case of a remote access or work from home, like we saw in the Menti poll that you did earlier, right? So we are seeing a typical enterprise network architecture with a hybrid network with MPLS and internet connecting the branch together, as well as allow them to access to the internet applications. And there is some VPN gateway sitting somewhere in the data center, right? So for remote work from home user, what they're going to do is they access to the VPN gateway for internal applications, and then they're going to go direct to the internet for some SaaS-based application. for some scenarios, such as certain application demand or the IT policy of the company demand that the end user got to VPN back to the data center, and from there on access the other part of application, be it on the internet or elsewhere. So actually that kind of routing back every data traffic to the data centers is create a latency problem, right? By that tromboning effect. And at the same time, when there is a surge coming back to the VPN gateway, that gateway will face congestion. So these two in combination create a performance issue for the application, as Chris mentioned earlier. And very interesting that at the start of COVID, we saw a lot of customers procuring urgently a huge amounts of internet bandwidth coming back to their data center to connect to the VPN gateway, and even the DDoS mitigation service to protect that VPN gateway in preparation for sending thousands of employees to working from home, right? So this approach we think is not agile, it's not scalable, and at the same time, it's not cost effective to prepare for remote workforce as well as the ongoing hybrid workforce arrangement. Right? So for some company who have already deployed SD-WAN, right, it does play some part of it in securely routing inter-branch traffic, right, or centralize the application access across all the branch, but it doesn't do that much for the remote users issue that they are facing. So therefore, we think there's a better approach to address this remote work from home access is to leverage on a cloud-based gateway, for example, that support multi-tenancies, that all the heavy lifting security functions built into that gateway, right? It should have a global presence across the globe and well connected to as many as global ISP as possible. At the same time, it could backhaul to the customer legacy network or the SDN network on-prem to allow us access to any application, be it on-prem, on the cloud, or on internet, right? At the same time, at the end users, it requires a secure access client that install on their laptop or mobile devices, and it should ideally support application-aware routings, checking with device postures, or even performance reporting of the end user's application access, right? So with that, as remote access client, then the end user could securely connect to the secure gateway where they authenticate and authorize the application access for each and every end users and create a secure connection from the end users to any application over the internet on the data centers or on the private public cloud. And at the same time, that gateway should also support the ability to have the management of all the end users application policies, as well as the visibility into the end users activities, right? So that is a simple case of the remote work from home. And I think we have a very good discussion here. So I will hand back over, invite Chris to take us through the 6 steps to simplify the SASE adoptions.
Okay, thank you, Tran. I will take over from there. And we'll start with step 1. Align with your business vision and strategy while focusing on your user experience. And what we mean here is it's critical to align the technology roadmap with whatever your business strategy and your company's vision might be. This is important as it could play a big part in your future tasks, the impacts of, and being able to be more flexible and controlling what you can do or how you will do it down the road. Okay. You may choose to deploy a phased approach, which could be a little bit at a time, or maybe it's a complete transformation looking at network, SD-WAN, your IT, your security perspective, and trying to make it one go in one project. So all critical to understanding what that business strategy is first before actually aligning that technology roadmap to that. Okay. Step 2, assess, identify, and adopt. And some of this might be very straightforward when we talk about assessing your current setup. Obviously understanding what your current environment limitations, what your security posture is in your company. It'll be different for every company. Market regulations and identity and identifying gaps is very critical to being able to deploy your services in key markets and countries around the world that could be highly regulated. Okay. Assessing your organization's risk appetite. This is extremely important too, as you'll be trying to understand what those budgets might be down the road, what your company would be willing to afford in terms of the solution. And then identifying the skills and resources available. You obviously need to ensure that internally you have the right people in the right place. Okay. Identifying your SASE use case. The most important takeaway for this one is actually getting to your internal teams, explaining what SASE is, what the impact of that SASE solution would be on how they do work and how they do business today. A lot of that will be a big change for them. And so understanding what those challenges are when you're doing these use cases is critical. And the best people to ask about that are going to be your own internal teams as you're doing that. And another key aspect is formalizing a SASE project team. You get the subject matter experts together. That way you can ensure to avoid as many gaps as possible in the use case and the solution that you want to deploy. And then lastly on here, the focus on user experience and adoption. Obviously, it's very critical to be understanding what is happening. This is going to be, as I just mentioned, a big change for the company, a cultural shift. So customers, it'll be very important to be engaging your clients, your end users, if you will, and understanding what the success metrics and KPIs will look like. Okay. On step 3, preparing your plan, the solution plan, deployment options, budget plan. So once you have your use cases identified, then it's about identifying the components, the SASE components that you're going to use for that use case, what the network aspect, that could be SD-WAN if you're deploying SD-WAN, what the compatibility is going to be, the technology choices that you want to incorporate into that solution, and also the roadmap alignment, making sure that you understand how these deployments will occur. You may, as I mentioned earlier, do something in a phased approach. You may want to have multiple partners involved. You may want to separate network deployments, getting that underway early before enabling the SASE solution after. Many different avenues, so it's important, as we mentioned earlier, to understand what the business priorities are. When it comes to the deployment options, do it yourself versus managed service provider option. And obviously there's many pros and cons for both. I think you'd see in a world that we used to have maybe 10 years ago, there was a big uptake on the managed service, outsourcing to that third party. And folks, and there still is that occurring, but if you have the expertise internally, perhaps it's more of a co-managed approach, or maybe you take the approach of, okay, we're going to have somebody manage the whole thing initially until we get up to speed, and then we'll take over from there, and then becomes a do-it-yourself. So there's a lot of different avenues here. It's not necessarily saying, hey, I'm doing it myself, no help, or I'm going to outsource the whole thing, managed service. It could be a co-managed arrangement where you're doing some, the managed service provider doing some as well. Obviously, you need to understand the pros and cons for each of those, particularly when you're looking at the managed service provider, what they're able to do, the resources, scale, budget, that type of thing comes into play. And then outline your budget needs. Your capital budget becomes extremely important, as well as your operating expense budget. Depending on the extent of the project itself, or the transformation project, the change that you want to endure, some companies will go all in and transform all at once. And then others will do, as I mentioned earlier, phased, very slow rollout approach, okay? But understanding those capital, what you have to play with from a financial perspective, and what those contingencies are extremely important front. On step 4, choose the right partner. Now, as I just mentioned, there are those managed service providers out there, and the market is full of them. And it's not just service providers. You've got network providers, you've got SD-WAN providers, you've got security providers, it is full of them. So it's important to do your due diligence on this one, understand what those partners bring to you and what they can do in the market. Do they have the global capabilities to support your offices, your network around the world from whether it be network or security perspective? Is the technology they're using up to date, up to par? Does it meet with what your requirements are for SASE and SD-WAN and other deployments that you may be doing. Interoperability with their network or their security platform support all of your systems, your internal systems, and your capabilities and requirements that you put in your use case. And then also with their interoperability with other providers, because as we've seen, most people actually nobody can do everything globally. So you typically have to rely, you may choose to go with one or two partners, but they would then rely on other providers as well. So understanding what their capabilities are there from their own partner perspective is important. And then having that strong alignment. Does their vision and goals, are they evolving with technology that would keep you up to par, that will enable you to scale and meet your business needs and your vision, okay? On step 5, it's time for the proof of concept and deployment planning. And much of this seems very straightforward, but it's critical to pause and understand some of these steps. So once you've deployed your proof of concept setup and you've begun to test your use cases, then the important thing is validating the performance and enforcing it. So is it meeting the security requirements, the expectations that you had? When you're validating this output, is it there? Or do you need to take a step back and look at doing something else? While you're doing this, you should be documenting the results and preparing the migration plan after the proof of concept is completed, okay? If the last but not least certainly is preparing your end user training. It is important for those end users to be aware and understand what they're getting into. As we mentioned earlier, it's a cultural change, and that change, understanding how to do that change needs to be taken very carefully and slowly. As many of you know, change can be very averse to many employees in many different companies. So having them get on board and understanding it is very important to the success, okay? And last but not least, it's a go. Step 6, it's a go. So implementing the governance plan, which has already been discussed or agreed upon, and then monitoring the utilization as well as the customer experience, making sure your end users are still taken care of, the security is still performing as you would expect, and ensuring that none of the end users are having a bad experience with connecting or having the security on their applications. As we mentioned previously, that challenge of these customers or the end users being remote and versus accessing applications and that may be on-prem. So we need to ensure that they're able to access their applications seamlessly, but still having it secure and compliant with the company guidelines. Okay, and then continuous review and recalibration. It's going to be constant work. This is very new to the market. SASE is, and so it will keep evolving. You have a lot of vendors and providers out there that continue to enhance their SASE solution. If you haven't already begun to go down that path of engaging as SASE provider or trying to enable SASE within your own company organization, that's okay. It's still evolving, as what we've seen with many providers, and now might be the right time to be engaging those outside vendors and looking at what the market has, okay? And what's next? So obviously you want to start embarking on this journey of SASE for your own company and for your end users and your experience. And Lumen would be, we'd be happy to hear how that journey goes for you and your clients. In addition, as a technology and network leader, we have one of the largest global networks, so we'd be happy to help and oblige. We are a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant and have quite a bit of experience in SD-WAN and SASE solutions globally. That includes North America, Europe, and Asia. So we would be happy to help if and when you might need it, okay? And in line with that, we would be offering complimentary workshops, which Tran or myself or someone from my product team would be willing to engage your folks, taking them through a one-on-one session with specific emphasis on SASE and any other applications that may be closely aligned, or products that are closely aligned, such as SD-WAN if it's needed. And yeah, happy to do those consultation workshops for you, free of charge, and engaging your people. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. And also this is one of the most popular things, because it does have like no obligation. It just networking with our experienced subject matter expert. And thanks again for your sharing today. So now is the Q&A time. If anyone have any question, feel free to type in the chat box. We have Chris and Trent's very experienced subject matter expert with us today, live answering your question. Feel free to either type in the chat box or on the Q&A box. Oh, okay. I have one question from the chat box. I think so, Chris, among this step, that like the 6th step of this SASE step, and then which one do you think is the most important or critical?
That's so great. We were actually thinking that question was going to come up. Tran and I were talking about that, and it might depend on who you talk to. Like my personal opinion is, I think it's natural that companies are going to go through the progression of evaluating their priorities and their roadmap. So I don't know that that would necessarily be the most critical step. I think what it may come down to is the do-it-yourself versus the managed service provider approach. That to me seems to be where you've seen companies, not necessarily with SASE, but let's say SD-WAN, which has been around a little bit longer, have tried the do-it-yourself and then said, oh, wow, this is too much. I need to go with managed service. And then others have gone with managed service and figured out, wait a minute, I can do it myself. So I think if you're asking me, I think that's the most critical, is understanding your resources, what you can and can't do, and then figuring out where you know, or whom the partner is that you'll be selecting to help while you do that, while you're doing the deployment. Because I can tell you in that market space, as I mentioned, there are many, many different options. You have to do your homework and not get sucked up with some of the common big providers out there that might be enabled, whether it be SD-WAN or SASE out there, and make sure you're looking at what's best for you as a company. And a lot of times that can get lost if certain providers are not giving you all the options. Okay, so I think that to me would be the most critical. I don't know, Tran, what do you have another opinion on what you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Chris. And you know, in the look at the OTT market today, there's a lot of providers are, you know, offering a partial solution, but yet telling the customer they can do everything end to end. For example, they were just looking at the core piece of the solution, which is, for example, the cloud-based security function, for example, but leaving the last mile access to the customer to worry about, right? That's the big missing gap, because if you don't have a reliable and good, say, underlay connectivity, say internet, for example, from the branch office go back to the cloud-based application, that's going to break the user experience, right? So that is something that we would recommend the customer to look at that as a total holistic solution from end to end, from the end user, from the branch office all the way to the SASE cloud infrastructures, as well as up to all the SaaS or enterprise applications as well.
Excellent point, Tran. Very good.
Thank you. So any more question on the chat box? Let me see. Okay, we have one Q&A. So you spoke, so I think this is for Chris and Trent, both of you. So you spoke about need to align the SD-WAN and SASE technology. Can you share more on that? Like if I already have embarked on an SD-WAN journey, how can I beyond my SASE roadmap?
Yeah, I'll go first, Tran, and then you piggyback on me. All right. As it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's a good segue from the last response, which Tran mentioned, that it's important to note that while SASE focuses a lot on the security aspect of your applications and the edge, the network itself, giving you the flexibility. But it's not good if you don't have the network in place. And as Tran mentioned, that last mile connectivity, your underlay network plays a big role. So, but the great thing about this is with SD-WAN and SASE, you can deploy separate. Like if you haven't begun SD-WAN, then it could be something you want to do jointly. We've seen customers that have not yet begun their SD-WAN journey. And what we've done is said, okay, well, there is SD-WAN, there's SASE, and it might be wise to incorporate both because you'll get the efficiencies deploying the proper transformation, the proper solution on day one. Other customers, they've already deployed SD-WAN. That means, okay, look at how SASE can complement that SD-WAN service offering today. And that would mean securing the applications and being able to move from that on-prem environment that we talked about earlier. So yeah, I would, if you haven't done either one, then you can look at doing both. If you've already done one, I would say, yeah, that's okay. Just start looking at SASE and figure out how that would fit into your network architecture that you have today for SD-WAN. Okay, and it's not as simple as just say, okay, turn on SASE. You'd have to look at all the options out there. There are different SASE options and solutions out there that would have, while they perform the same function of security, they do have different little tidbits and obviously pricing and everything that can vary amongst all the vendor options. So, Tran, go ahead.
I think a lot of what I'm thinking you've been said by you, Chris. Yeah, yeah. In fact, that nowadays, a lot of I would say vendors claiming out that they have a SASE compatible solution, even though they have a little piece of that. So by and large, we see there are a full SASE solution. That means they incorporate all the components that Gartner have defined, such as the SD-WAN, SWG, Zero Trust Network, access, etc., etc. But some vendors, they are purely focused on the cloud-based securities and leaving the SD-WAN to somebody else to do, right? So the kind of choices for you as a customer, either to choose a fully SASE component solution or somebody that have half of that. It really depends on where you are in the journey, right? And if you haven't do anything, then we think that it makes more sense to go into the fully compatible SASE solution where it incorporate SD-WAN and all the cloud-based security function built into that.
Okay, thank you. So also we have this is from our audience as well. So our audience is for us, infrastructure security guys. How do we get our application development DevOps team for SASE?
I'm sorry, say that last part again, Kenneth.
Okay, so for us, infrastructure security guy, how do we get our applications development DevOps team for SASE?
How do you get it? Like in terms of, I wonder if he's asking, how do we
how do we get on board?
Oh, how do you get on board?
How do we get them on board with SASE strategy?
Got it. Yes. So as we mentioned, it's definitely a cultural shift, and change can always be somewhat difficult, particularly for your employees. We know firsthand in our own company how change can be not easy for everybody. So holding those internal conversations up front, if need be, bring in the outside expertise. We were talking about having these transformation discussions that we're happy to hold. Tran already holds numerous of these with every one of the clients that we've had. We always meet up front with all of the groups. And when I say all the groups, I think it's key that some companies may still operate in those silos of, okay, you've got your chief network officer or chief technology officer, and then you got your CSO and your CIO. And what this solution does is brings all of that together. So it's important to go across lines, if those lines exist, and bring all the teams together, bring in the expertise from outside. If you don't have it internally, by all means, the experience and the expertise is out there. Someone like Tran or myself or any other vendors out there would happily come in and speak to your groups, to your CIOs, CTOs, whoever they may be, and explain how SASE can make a difference to your network transformation and security from your security posture as well. So that would be the best approach up front. I think going from there, you don't want to jump in. It's important to make sure that you're talking to all of these folks internally and aligning, because that has a lot to do with what we said. Step one was aligning with your business strategy and your vision there. That's the first step, getting all of the key stakeholders involved, and then going out and talking. If you need some expertise to come in, there's no obligation to make a decision with that expert. You just go have them come in, explain to you what more about what SASE is, explain to the other subject matter experts in your company, whether they be security or infrastructure or network, and then it could be Q&A session time. Okay, figuring out, you can then have time to go back and draw up what that use case or what the solution would look like internally for you in your company. So that's what I would suggest. And I don't know, Tran, if you want to add on to that.
That's great. I think that's great.
There's
no more to add on.
So okay, that's great. So that's one last question for me. Any last advice for our audience today to take away?
Yeah, I don't mean to sound like a broken record. I'd say, look, the SASE, as we mentioned, was just coined a few years ago, and so we're still seeing vendors evolving. In fact, they're moving very quickly in this space to try to get out in front. So the solution itself, SASE solutions that come from, whether they be SD-WAN vendors or network providers or other vendors out there, they're still evolving. Okay, and the features and capabilities, the security features, capabilities you get with that, some don't have them all. Some already have key aspects or components of it, in terms of a network, but not so strong with security. Others might have strong security, but not so much strong network. So it's the entire market is evolving. So take it slowly, do the proper evaluations that you need, and make sure that the selection you make, it fits what your business needs are. Don't feel pressured to go with any of the big names, particularly if they're a technology vendor or somebody else. But understand that some of those, if they have the global scale and capabilities to meet you, then hey, that's okay. All right. That would be my advice. Go slow. It's early. Tran?
Yes, thanks, Chris. I think I cannot answer any better than that.
Okay, so that's why, as mentioned earlier, Chris and Trent, they are ready for giving out like complimentary consultation. No obligation, feel free just reach out to them to have a chat, especially the one that like don't have those expertise in your team, and just have a chat with them. And then they're always happy to give out more advice and based on your situation. So since you guys don't have questions, actually I prepare a survey for you guys. For the next page, it will be our QR code for our survey. It's very important to have you guys comment on our webinar and what can we do more different kind of topic for you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chris and Trent. Thank you for your time, for giving up, be here on live with our audience today.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.